Hi golfers, and welcome to this week's newsletter. Last week we sent out a request for any newsletter readers to send their videos in, and John Holland, a member of the Dyke Golf Club, very kindly sent his in to be analysed, and very brave of him too. So here we are to briefly go through his golf swing and talk through a couple of the faults that tend to happen and why some of his bad shots happen. We'll start off by looking at his setup. As you can see at first glance, the setup looks very solid. Good distance from the ball, nice neutral grip, good ball position, and nice looking crisp posture. Even though that grip is nice and neutral, we tend to see that John holds a bit too much tension in his forearms and into his top of his arms and shoulders. And I think this leads to one of his problems later on in the top of his backswing, which we'll scroll through to now. But before we do that, John has a tendency, or his complaint if you like, is a tendency to hit the ball a little bit too high and a tendency to catch the ball a little bit toppy or a little bit thin with the irons. The shots, if not on line, can tend to be a little bit of a push or a bit of a hook. So we're going to try and look out for the reasons behind that. So as we swing through the backswing, we go back to about waist height to start with. And at this point here, the club looks in a very good position, on a good angle around his body. Shoulders are turning nicely, maintaining his width nicely towards the top of his backswing. We get about halfway back, the club shaft on a good angle around his body, hands opposite the centre of his chest, and again the shoulders continuing to turn with the length of his backswing that he's making. As we reach the top of the backswing, we start to see a couple of telltale signs. The left arm starting to break down and bend, right arm I guess is doing the same behind his head, and we can start to see a sign that his left hand is cupping slightly, it's flexing inwards slightly. This has a tendency to get the club face open at the top. And as we reach to the top, that it just continues to happen. The shoulder hasn't really turned anymore. The arms have swung the club back further. We can't quite see it in this video at the top, but the club face is open and the left arm is bent, and that left wrist we can just about see popping out from the side of John's head is very, very cupped. So that means, unfortunately, on the way down, before he reaches the golf ball, as he reaches the golf ball, he's got to refine the width of his arms, the length of his arms that he had to start with to get the club to the bottom of the ball, but also heavily rotate those forearms to try and get the club face square at impact. So as you swing back down, not a bad start to the downswing and trying to make up for it. Arms are starting to extend already. Forearms starting to rotate to try and get that club face back. And unfortunately now, because of all that work gone on early on the downswing, it's left us with a couple of problems. One, the club has been thrown down quite close to the ground already, so it's shallowed out greatly on the downswing. And two, we're starting to see, just as we go a couple of frames further forward, that as he reaches impact, the lower half hasn't really moved because he spent so much time and effort and skill getting that club into a reasonable position with his hand and arm swing, that his lower half has had to stay and remain very stationary for allowing that to happen. The telltale sign now is, unfortunately, through impact, his left shoulder is starting to fold up into his neck. His posture's become taller, and this is one of the things that leads to that slightly thin strike, especially with an iron, let alone with a driver off a tee peg. So hopefully by this point, John has managed to square that club face up, but if it doesn't, the ball goes high to the right, or if he overdoes that compensation, the club face then closes, and on a bad day you can get that quick hook, which obviously no one likes to see out on the golf course, which is definite scorecard wrecker. So as we swing a little bit further on, we see a few more telltale signs. That left shoulder's really getting tilted upwards, right shoulder's down low. Belt buckle is still kind of looking at the ball as the club goes whistling past him, and really we'd like to see the legs in this sort of position at impact, but we are 3 or 4 frames on from impact, unfortunately. So the club's gone whistling past him, added loft, caught the ball a little bit off the bottom of the club, and then everything catches up and synchronises again into a very balanced, solid looking follow through. So John had a good day when he puts that timing together. It's a lot of good quality golf shots, and therefore is very steady off his handicap. On a bad day, the loss of control of the ball flight and the quality of the strike disappearing, the handicap suddenly becomes a bit more tricky. So John, if you're listening, if we can try and loosen that grip off a little bit at the setup, maintain that width a bit better at the top of your backswing, keep that wrist from getting cupped, therefore the club face is square already, those compensations aren't needed on the downswing. So you can start your downswing with the weight moving forward and your left side rotating out the way to allow room for the club to swing through and for you to maintain your height better, bring the club face back to the ball squarer and get a much stronger, squarer strike on the back of the golf ball. So a lot of good things happen in John's golf swing, just a couple of weaknesses there which stem a little bit from the setup and causes some later problems in the downswing. In synchronizing it every day becomes a difficulty. So I hope that helps, John. Anybody else with a similar problem might want to take note and put that into play. Again, very happy to analyse anybody else's golf swings out there from our readers. So if you'd like to, send them in to me and we'll hopefully bring up the next one in the next newsletter or two. I hope you're all doing well. Hope you enjoyed the video and I'll speak to you soon.